So, Sarah, we understand your base case. What would change your mind?
Well, I'm watching a couple of things. One, I'm watching to see the meetings on the Hill today. They are finally really back and able to have conversations with each other to decide what they think should happen. And I'm watching in particular the leadership, not only Leader Schumer on the Democratic side and Hakeem Jeffries, but also Pelosi and Clyburn, who are very, very close to Biden. And then let's keep an eye on those senators and House members who are up in very, very vulnerable races. What are they saying? What is Bob Casey in Pennsylvania saying? Those are the voices that are going to be the strongest. And if they unite, and they will have to at this point, then they are going to, have a president who's a little bit more willing to listen to the perspective than he is right now. The second thing that I'm watching is the polls. We have not seen lots of state polls coming out. We should get some more this week. That will also be informative.
But Sarah, when it comes to the polls, the president yesterday, when he was on Morning Joe, talked about the fact that the majority of Democrats want to see him. But the polls going back a year now showed that most of these individuals, the American electorate, including Democrats, think he is too old. So how does he square this circle of the Democrats want me there, but all the polls for months have been showing actually they think he's too old to carry the torch?
Well, I think the point that he was making in that context was leadership, the leaders in the party. Look, your point is right. He has a really big challenge. It's hard to see the path right now for the president, given that he is down in some of the key states like Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona almost seem out of reach for him at this point. And Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, he would have to have a 3-for-3 sweep. And that is difficult, too. So you're right. The voters have been sending a message. But this president's perspective is that he's been counted out before and that he is the best one to take the case to the folks. And whether or not Democrats agree with that privately, they're going to have to mount quite an effort to change his perspective.
If he were to step aside, how do you view this playing out? Does it immediately go to the vice president?
It doesn't immediately go. He has to the president would have to release his delegates. And then there would be an open process in some sense to figure out who that nominee would be. That would happen at the convention, and somebody would have to get a majority of the delegates. I think what people are saying that's right is that process does favor Vice President Harris. She is more popular with that set of delegates than she is in the country across the board. There is a lot of women of color in that delegate group. There's a lot of people who care about choice, where she's been very active. So it does favor her. She is vetted. But there is certainly an opportunity for somebody else to get in. Part of what would matter is how Biden would frame it if he were to get out of the race. Would he and Obama and others really signal that they really want delegates to go that direction? Or would they say, you know what, this is really a time for our party to decide? Those are things I'd be watching for to decide how big Vice President Harris's advantage would be.
Sarah, there are so many double haters. There's so many people who are disenfranchised from the current system based on the fact that a lot of people don't like either option at this current point. Do you think that it basically undermines Joe Biden's argument when he basically says, get behind me or get out, and there's sort of this feeling that you need to coalesce around him and not speak publicly what you think privately, which has been the reason why there was such an outrage from the debate in the first place?
The president's trying quite vigorously. And by the way, I am surprised it took him as long as it did to really put up the fight that we've seen since Friday. That was really more than a week after the debate performance. So I think potentially he could have stemmed a bit more of this if he had got going a little bit early. That being said, his point is quite clear, which is he has won the delegates, the overwhelming portion. He has been through a process. And so I think he is trying to turn the page on this episode to tell people to move on or to challenge him at the convention. I think my sense of it is that if he makes it through this week and the conversation actually changes to the Republican convention, maybe to NATO in the week, then he's going to be in safer ground. And those who want him to step aside probably need to put together an organized effort, really starting today and this week to make that case, because certainly over the weekend he has come out swinging, as you mentioned, calling into Morning Joe, doing a range of events, and doing what this president does when his backup is against the wall, and that is to fire up a bit and press on.
Sarah, I'm glad you mentioned NATO. It feels like lame duck NATO, where you have Emmanuel Macron meeting with Joe Biden to talk about policy at a time where neither of them have particular domestic strength. How much is that going to be on display in a way that can't really be positive, given how much confidence can you get from any resolution that they come to, given they're all facing some really big challenges at home?
It's a great point. There are so many elections globally this year, not just in the United States and France, but across the board. And it's always challenging to govern in these kinds of really disruptive periods. That being said, there's a lot of issues on the board for NATO in and around Ukraine. And to the degree that voters think about this, certainly Biden has a different approach to addressing world leaders than we've seen with President Trump. He is a bigger believer in multilateral institutions. So he's going to try and use this opportunity to remind people why they should want him in charge. Again, very difficult to do on foreign policy issues, but you're right. It is a challenging time, and certainly when I travel around the world, leaders there are very focused on the United States election as well, and trying to plan for what their future might look like, no matter what happens in November.